Most of you know this about me, but I'm a father to 3 little kids, which is another way of saying my car is never clean. And for some reason, my wife's car seems to be clean, but mine is never. And that might be because my kids are a little bit too comfortable in my car with their dirty wrappers. Well, anyway, it came to a head the other day. I was dropping my kids off at school, my 2 oldest, and I have a 6-year-old. And as she's getting out of the car, she is about out of the door, and she looks at me and she goes, "Dad, this car is a mess, and it needs to be cleaned before I get back in it. Bye." If you know her, you're not surprised. If you don't know her, that's who she is. And so, I did what any good dad would do. I took that car straight over to Woody's, and I got that thing a bath, and I vacuumed the floor mats out, and I wiped the dash down with whatever that spray that they give you is there. And, later that day, I said, "Hey, Rach, why don't you stay home? I'll go get the kids from school." So I pull up, and I whip that thing around, and my car is nice and clean, and my daughter gets in, and I'm waiting. She goes, "Dad, you cleaned your car." And before I could even celebrate, she goes, "Up, but you missed a spot." "Where did I miss a spot?" And she lifts up her booster seat to reveal World War III that had happened under there at some point. And we've got crumbs, we've got wrappers. We have a half-eaten Chomp's meat stick that was probably the reason why my car smelled the last 6 weeks, right? And I was just struck by this fact that, looked really clean at first glance, but once you kind of began to dig underneath the surface, was not as clean as I would have liked for it to be. I think that's a lot like life. It's easy to look polished. It's easy to look good in front of people. In fact, we say here, Pastor JJ, our senior pastor, has a saying where he says, in South Tampa especially, we are smooth on the outside, but shattered on the inside. And it's easy to put up a facade and to look a certain way until the light shines. We remove the proverbial booster seat, and then we actually see how bad things truly are. I think this week has been a week where we've seen just truly how bad things are. In a world where it is easy to medicate our brokenness, hide our brokenness, brokenness has been put on full display. We live in a cultural moment where, unfortunately, news alerts ping our phones, and we have seen images, we have seen videos of brokenness this week, and what we have seen is horrific. A school shooting in Colorado. The death of a woman on public transit, and the assassination of a public figure, a Christian, a father, a husband. And that's just the brokenness that made the headlines. That doesn't accurately portray the countless broken moments all over the world that happened this week that didn't make a news cycle. But here's what I've been struck with this week. The world didn't break this week. There was just a massive spotlight shown on the brokenness of our world this week. So like many of you, the question I'm asking is, what do I do with that? I mean, literally, I'm a father, I'm a husband, I'm trying to lead my family, I'm trying to be a good friend to people, I'm in group chats, I'm in family conversations, and I'm trying to figure out personally, how do I wrestle with this? What do I do with this? You're asking the same question, I would imagine, and we've seen the answer to that question from our world. When tragedy comes, when brokenness rises to the surface, we hear these messages, right? We hear our world saying, take action, post more, say more laws, more rules, more regulations from both sides of the aisle. The key there is do. Do something about the brokenness that is out here. But here's what I've been struck with. What if brokenness out there can never be healed until we first deal with the brokenness that is in here? Again, I don't want to project this onto you, but I know for me this week, it has been very easy for me to point out the brokenness that is all around me. Whether it's through a headline I'm reading, something I'm seeing on social media. And when I do that, like I naturally point fingers, right? I point at politicians, I point at systems, I point at a broken culture. I go, what is wrong with people? That's my go-to, honestly. But what I've been struck with is that if I actually look at the gospel never actually tells me to look at other people's sin first. It tells me to look at my own. And here's what I'm convinced of. If your brokenness is not healed by Jesus, it will be handed down to others. And that's what we've seen this week. We've seen incredible brokenness that has never been healed by Jesus and has been handed down to others. But that's not just true about headline stories. That's true about our own hearts. So what should we do about that? Well, I think for us, as a follower of Jesus today, if you're looking here going, what is the response of a Christian in the midst of all this? I think our first response before we combat brokenness out there is to confront the brokenness that is within every single one of us. Because broken people will continue to break people until that brokenness is redeemed by the one who was broken on a cross for us. So here's what we have to do this morning. We have to talk about how we confront our brokenness. And we're going to do that by looking at the words that Paul wrote to the Colossians, this church in Colossae, thousands of years ago, that was actually forcing them to address their brokenness. And I want to just give you even a glimpse deeper behind the curtain how God works and how he's working at STF. You know, for us, we plan out our Sunday morning messages months in advance. And what I mean by that is that we plan a calendar, who's going to preach when, what are the topics that week, what are the passages that week, and it's very rare that we change what we're going to talk about. So I had a lot of friends, pastors this week, that were texting me, calling me, hey, what are you changing your message to this week? What are you going to talk about in light of what happened? And I said, I'm not changing it. And their first response is, oh, so you're not going to say anything? You're not going to address the brokenness that's happening around us? And I say, no, let me tell you how my God works. In May, we decided upon this sermon series. We planned out the first week of September through the end of November. And on September the 14th in May, we decided that this week we were going to preach on brokenness. I say we decided. The Lord guided our hand. And he guided us to this passage that I think uniquely speaks to how we deal with brokenness, first within us and then around us. So let's read what Paul says to the Colossians. In Colossians chapter 1, starting in verse 9, it says this: "For this reason, since the day we heard about you, we have not stopped praying for you." What's the reason? Well, the reason we talked about last week, Pastor JJ, as he opened up our vision series, explained that the Colossians had a great name amongst the church. Like people from all over, Paul specifically, who'd never even been there, knew that the Colossians were following Jesus. So for that reason, we haven't stopped praying for you. We continually ask God to fill you with the knowledge of his will through all the wisdom and understanding that the Spirit gives, so that you may live a life worthy of the Lord and pleasing him in every way, bearing fruit in every good work, growing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, so that you may have a great endurance and in patience, and giving joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people in the kingdom of light. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. The brokenness of Colossae is not the same as the brokenness that we're experiencing. The people in Colossae, we're not getting Instagram and Facebook notifications every few minutes of someone who said this or did that. But they were still living in a broken situation. In fact, what was unique about even Colossae at this time period is that it was kind of an amalgamation of religious and worldview thought. You had Roman religion, you had local philosophies and folklore, and you had Christianity and Judaism kind of all hodgepodge into this one place, which means it was very easy, and the temptation was to, when something happened in the world, for you to let all these different ideologies form your opinion. A little bit from them, a little bit from them, a little bit from them. Paul is going to reorient their thinking in Colossians, specifically by reminding them of the brokenness within them that they have been saved out of. And here's what we're going to see here, right? He's going to show us that you cannot combat the brokenness around you unless you first confront the brokenness within you. And pause again. You cannot combat the brokenness around you, and man, is there a lot of brokenness around us, unless you first confront the brokenness within you. So how do we confront our brokenness? We're going to see today it's two things, two steps. One, we're going to have to recognize our brokenness, like for what it really is. And then two, once we recognize it, we're going to have to bring it to Jesus. So let's break both of those down this morning. First, recognize your brokenness. I don't know what your Saturday tradition is. For the longest time, mine began at 9 a.m. on the couch with college game day. And then it stayed on the couch through the noon games. And then it proceeded to continue on the couch through the 3:30 games. And then on the couch still into the evening games. And if I made it into the bedroom for that night, I would go to sleep. But possibly I slept on the couch. I have children now, which means my Saturdays, they don't look like that anymore. Because someone wants to watch Gabby's Dollhouse, even though Ohio State's playing right now. I mean, why would we want to watch anything else? So they're watching there, and I'm watching here, and I'm wondering, who pays the bills here? And so, have you ever been watching a game, especially maybe like a local game, like a Bucks game or something, like a Lightning game, and as they pan the crowd, you see someone you know? Has that ever happened to you? Please nod so I don't feel like a crazy person. Yeah, it's happened to you? Okay. Right, you're looking, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's J. Mike Johnson. I know him. So what do? I want to get my phone out. I'm going to take a picture of J. Mike, and I'm going to go, hey, dude, I saw you on TV, right? Because I recognized him. Now, what's interesting is that as they're panning the crowd, if you don't see someone you recognize, the crowd doesn't do anything to you. It's just there. It's just a sea of faces. But when you see the face you know, all of a sudden it catches your attention. Think about being at an airport or at a mall or something like that where something similar can happen. Now, that is what we have to do with our brokenness, because for a lot of us, brokenness is just this like conceptual idea. Sea of faces, like, yes, I'm broken, the world's messed up, I'm not a great person, I mess up. Like, it's just this generic brokenness. But we have to actually recognize the specifics of our brokenness, the same way we would recognize a friend in a sea of faces. And when we recognize our brokenness, here's what we recognize. We recognize two things about it. Just how we are broken. Here's the first thing we recognize. We recognize that we're broken because sin disqualifies us. If you actually look at your brokenness and recognize it, you are going to see first that you are broken because sin has disqualified you. Look back at verse 12. When Paul is finishing his prayer, he says that he gives joyful thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of his holy people. He has qualified you, follower of Jesus, to share in the inheritance. The assumption that's not being said, but that's implied here, is that he had to qualify you because you were disqualified. Now, why were you disqualified? Why was I disqualified? Because of our sin. What is sin? Sin is any time we miss the mark. God has a design and a will for your life. He has created you and the world around you, and therefore he knows how it's supposed to work. Anytime you veer off of that design, you are sinning, because you are saying, I know how to better direct my life than God does. The problem, though, is that when we do that, we look at the one who created us, and with the breath he gave us in our lungs, we use that breath and say, I will not follow you. It's defiance. We see this in us saying, I will do what I want with my money, what I want with my body, what I want with my words. I'll be friends with who I want to be friends with. I'll do what I want to do because I know what's better for my life. And again, sin is not just I made a bad decision or I made a mistake. Sin is I have rebelled against a holy God. And we have to let that sit for just a second. Because for many of us, especially if we grew up around church or been around church for any period of time, we can actually train ourselves to live our lives as close to sin as possible without actually sinning. Because we've reduced it to just bad decisions that we make. But if sin is more of a direction than a decision, it changes how we view sin. Sin is a direction that we are heading away from God because we have rebelled against God. And that has disqualified us, which means this. It has put us into a position where we cannot be with God because we have told God we want to do things our own way. We see this in all of our lives. We see it in our anger that we entertain. We see it in our lust that we don't get rid of. We see it in our jealousy and in our bitterness. We see it all over us. So when I read, he has qualified me, the implied thing there is that I was not able to qualify myself. I wasn't able to do it on my own. I wasn't able to be in a relationship with God without God specifically intervening for me. Why are you broken? Why am I broken? Because of our sin. You know, I've shared this before that I like to dabble in the kitchen a little bit. A lot of it. And there's two types of chefs. I wouldn't call myself a chef. Maybe you call me a chef, but I won't give myself that title. There's two types of people who cook. Those who follow recipes and those who don't. I am the latter. Surprise. And my wife can't stand it because, when she's cooking, she's got, the recipe up on her phone and she's, doing like, tablespoon of this. And I'm just like, hey, give me the paprika. I know it has no taste, but I need this color to change just a little bit, right? Like that's how I cook. And sometimes that works. Sometimes, though, that doesn't work. You know when that doesn't work? When I'm trying to bake something. You know what I don't do often? Bake something. Because, you know what? If I'm reading a recipe for a batch of brown butter chocolate chip cookies, that sounds nice right now, doesn't it? And it says put a cup of sugar in here, and I go, you know what? I do like a little bit of salt in mine. I'm going to put a cup of salt in here. What's it going to do? It's going to break the recipe. It's going to break my cholesterol if I eat it, right? That's what we do. That's sin. The creator, the one who made the recipe, we are saying, I know better than you. And then we look at him and go, why does this cookie taste so bad? Why is my life not working? Why do I struggle in relationships? Why am I insecure? Why am I filled with all of this shame? Because you've been listening to your sin. And because of that, you've been disqualified. But that's not the only way and reason why we're broken. We're also broken because Satan wants to destroy us. Look at verse 13 one more time. For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. Darkness has a dominion. It has a kingdom, and kingdoms have rulers. Paul is reminding us that behind the brokenness that we can see, there is an unseen enemy who's out to destroy us, who is manipulating and informing this brokenness. Guys, especially after the week that we just had, we have to more than ever remember that we cannot naturalize the spiritual. We instead have to spiritualize the natural. That what we see and think is just people making decisions is actually part of something much darker because there is a darker force working behind them. And if you're like, Chris, you're getting a little weird for me. Well, I don't mean to be weird because Paul was weird first. Look at what he said in Ephesians 6. Finally, be strong. You want to have strength? We've talked a lot about this week. Being a strong follower of Jesus in the midst of what's going on in our culture. Be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Well, how are you going to do that? You got to put on the full armor of God so you can take your stand against the whose schemes? Not a political party's schemes, not a certain type of person's schemes, not a particular race's schemes. The devil's schemes. Why? Because he says our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's against rulers and against authorities and against powers of this dark world, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Look at the wording that Paul chooses. Rulers, authorities, powers. This is not like peasant stuff. This is the enemy in a seat of power and the dominion of darkness manipulating and controlling what is happening in this world. That means that if this week you have looked at a certain type of person and said, you are my enemy, you have missed it and you have been deceived. As I sat this week and scrolled my phone and saw reactions that I disagreed with and commentary that I disagreed with and things that I disagreed with, and I welled up in anger and wanted to type back and argue and fight, I had to remind myself, Chris, your battle is not against them. It is against someone who is influencing and working within them. We have to recognize this, because if we don't, we will forget what Jesus said in John 10:10, that the enemy has come. He's a thief. He's come to steal, kill, and destroy. That is not hyperbole, guys. That is not just metaphorical language. The devil wants to kill you because you bear the image of God and he hates God. We are not in this trite conflict. We are in a war against an unseen spiritual enemy, and we have to see where our battle is raging. But here's the thing. He is our enemy, but he's a professional at distracting us from knowing that he is our enemy. In the 1950s, C.S. Lewis wrote a book called The Screwtape Letters. The book is a fictional work that talks about a real thing, humanity being tempted. The premise of the book is there is an older demon named Screwtape writing to a younger demon, his nephew, named Wormwood. And he's giving him all of these ways that he can tempt mankind. In the 1950s, C.S. Lewis said this: "My dear Wormwood," so this is part of the letter he's writing, "be sure that the patient is the person being tempted, remains completely fixated on politics, arguments, political gossip, and obsessing on the faults of people they've never met serves as an excellent distraction from advancing in personal virtue, character, and the things the patient can control." How many of you have found yourself this week overwhelmed by things you have zero control over? He goes on to say this: "Make sure to keep the patient in a constant state of angst, frustration, and general disdain towards the rest of the human race in order to avoid any kind of charity or inner peace from further developing. Ensure the patient continues to believe that the problem is out there in the broken system rather than recognizing that there is a problem in himself. Keep up the good work. Uncle Screwtape." Translation: if your anger has been directed at anything other than the devil this weekend and this week, you and I have found ourselves under his deception. And why does this deception work? Because it forces us to keep the focus off of our brokenness and keep it on others' brokenness. And remember what we said: if your brokenness is not healed by Jesus, it will be handed down to others. It's okay to be angry. Gosh, if you've not been angry this week, you need to have a serious check in your heart. But what does Paul say in Ephesians 4:26? Be angry and do not sin. And he doesn't just mean, oh, I'm angry now, I want to hit somebody. That's not the sin he's talking about only. He's talking about when I'm angry and I let that anger well up into bitterness in my own heart, and then I don't even check my own anger and bitterness at the foot of the cross. Satan wants to destroy us. That's what it looks like to recognize your brokenness. I'm broken because of my sin, and I'm broken because of Satan. Think about it like this: sin is the chain wrapped around your ankle, and Satan is the jailer holding the chain in his hand. That's the weight and the depth of our brokenness. But we don't just recognize our brokenness. We have to do something about our brokenness. We have to take our brokenness somewhere. Look at those last two verses again. Look at what Paul says we have to do with our brokenness. "For he has rescued us from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son whom he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sin." Once you recognize your brokenness, you have to bring your brokenness to Jesus. And when that happens, something fundamentally changes. And this is where we begin to see how we combat brokenness by first confronting it within ourselves. Listen, when you bring your brokenness to Jesus, he restores what is broken and repositions you as a victor and not a victim. The world we live in right now makes it very easy to live under a victim mentality because of the brokenness around us and within us. But under the gospel, we have to recognize when we bring our brokenness to Jesus, he does something with it to redeem it. Two things he does: restores and repositions us. First, Jesus restores our brokenness. Look at this specific line in verse 13. It says that he rescued us, he redeemed us, and he has given us the forgiveness of sins. This is not just talking about like a small remodel, a adjustment here and an adjustment there, which is, by the way, what most of us want when it comes to our relationship with God. God, don't upend everything. Don't change everything. Just change a couple of these areas of my life that are not that comfortable for me at the moment. That's not what he promises. The language of rescue, forgiveness of sins, this is the language of total and complete restoration. And that flies in the face of what is most convenient and comfortable for us. Right, like when our house flooded a year ago, as I'm there the day after it happens, and I'm trying to figure out what are we going to do. At first, I'm the eternal optimist. We'll just get some dehumidifiers in here, and we'll suck the water out, and we'll move back in a week or two. But as I'm there, and it's that afternoon, I can't get a hold of my insurance company. I can't get a hold of a remediation company. I'm sitting there, and I've got a bunch of guys. Some of you in this room were at my house on that day, and we're trying to figure out what do we do, like what's the decision we're going to make. And I look at my drywall, which obviously had water that had come into my house. It was about a foot high. And I'm seeing that the water line is no longer a foot high. It's about 3 feet high now. And I clicks in my head, oh my goodness, this water is spreading up my drywall. It's ocean water. It's got ridiculous, nasty stuff in it. Like it's going to produce mold in my house. And so I look at my dad and say, hey, Dad, should we like cut this drywall out? And he's like, maybe you can, but you got to be careful. Like, maybe the insurance might knock you for that. So I'm like, I don't really know what to do. He's like, listen, whatever you want to do, we'll help you do it. And I look over, I'm standing in my doorway. It's me and my dad. And I look over, and Danny Hardy is standing there, and he's got a saw in his hand. He goes, you tell me what you want to do, big dog, and I'll do it. I look at him in the eyes. I said, cut it, Danny. And that boy was gone, right? And all of a sudden, there were about 10 people cutting drywall out of my house. And what followed was like 6, 8 months, whatever it was, of a complete restoration. Ripping out all of my floors. Ripping out all of our cabinets, all of our appliances, down to the studs, to the concrete. And then slowly, but surely, building it back one piece at a time. That is what it looks like for Jesus to restore your brokenness. I want him to come in and just dry some water off the ground, give it a day, and then move back in. No. Because the reason I do what I do is because of the idol structures that are in my heart. And you want to know what's not comfortable? When my idols get challenged. When my idols of comfort and security get challenged. When my idols of control get challenged. That hurts, that's hard, but that's what it takes to truly restore our brokenness. He completely restores our brokenness. And also, by the way, that applies to not just the brokenness in your life because of your decisions. He also restores the brokenness that's in your life because of other people's decisions. Or because of things that have happened to you that are not your fault, but that are no other than a problem and a product of a broken world. You didn't say that thing to you when you were a child. Someone else did. You didn't abuse you like someone did. You didn't cheat on you like someone did. You didn't treat you like someone else did. Most of us have broken parts of our life that were broken by other people's brokenness. And now, especially because of the world we live in today, we think, well, I can never change because of what was done to me. If that's the case, then the gospel is not true and Jesus is still dead. Because the worst thing that could be done to you is that you could die, and you serve a God who died and rose again, defeating death. Even the most broken, ugly parts of you can be redeemed and restored by Jesus. But we have to understand something. That in order for that to happen, we recognize he's restored our brokenness, but more specifically, the next thing we're going to see is that he has, in restoring our brokenness, repositioned us as victors. Look at this language again in verse 13. He has brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves. That word, brought us. Some of your translations might say he has transferred us. It's this idea of when I transfer money from my bank account into your bank account. It's no longer mine, it is now yours. The money no longer sits with me, it sits with you. That's the point here. You no longer sit here in the dominion of darkness. You have been transferred into a new kingdom. But notice this, okay? This is what's so important, especially for what we've been saying as a church. That we're broken people becoming authentic followers of Jesus. Don't think that that's us saying, oh no, we're so broken we can never change. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we are broken, but we have now been broken by someone else, not sin and Satan. Understand this. Sin and Satan break you to destroy you. Jesus breaks you to heal you. There is a new brokenness that you possess as a follower of Jesus. So you still walk in the world broken, but not broken in defeat, broken in victory. And we have to understand this. When we look at the world in that way, we don't look at the world as those who cannot change anything. We don't look at the world as those who are defeated by brokenness. We look at the world of those who follow the one who has overcome the grave. But that's hard. Like Jesus breaking you, it's not comfortable. I remember like maybe a year or two into being married when I was a student pastor. It was 2 days before Christmas. We were playing like flag football with a bunch of like high school guys that were in our student ministry. Like my early 20s were weird, guys, because I'd go out and play like football or basketball with these like high school kids, and I'd ball out and I'd go, man, I could have made it in the league, you know? And this was one of those moments. And I was out there, and I was playing quarterback, obviously, and I was rolling out. I had a little pressure from the left-hand side, and I rolled out to the right, and I had a little flat route, but I had a corner out in the back of the end zone, and I had this corner defender there playing cover 2, and I knew if I just popped it, you don't think I know ball. So I've got a linebacker, he's blitzing me, and so I go and I throw this ball, and as I do, his hand comes down and jams my finger. Didn't feel great. Kept on playing through it. I'm a warrior. And so about a day later, we're loading the car up. It's Christmas Eve services have finished at the church we were at, and we're loading the car up. And I look at my wife and said, Brady, she's like, my finger does not feel good. And she's like, I'm sorry, but we got to get in the car and go. So you're going to figure that out. And so we get in the car, and we drive up to Dalton, Georgia. And we get to Dalton, and we're celebrating Christmas with my wife's family. And my finger's not getting any better. So I start talking about it. You can see it's kind of getting swollen. So my mother-in-law, she's amazing. She put some thieves oil on it. It didn't do much. And so eventually I'm like, hey, I've got to go to a doctor. So I go to a doctor in town, and they do an x-ray. And he looks at me, and he goes, when did this happen? I said, like a week ago. He said, your finger's like shattered. Why did you not go to the doctor sooner? I said, my wife wouldn't let me. It didn't work. And so he's like, you got to go home. You got to go see a hand doctor. I don't know what it's called. You probably do. And so I go home. I see a hand specialty person, and he's like, hey, man, we've got to do surgery on this. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to re-break your finger. I said, unfortunately, I'm going to go pay somebody else. Yeah, well. Had to get the finger rebroken, didn't feel good. But if you're ever wondering why when I do this, when I preach, if it feels extra powerful, it's because we got 4 rods in this finger right here. Can't bend it past that, but by golly, that thing is strong. Man, isn't that how God works, though? We are broken because of our sin, and yet we try to heal in the wrong ways that keep us more broken. I heard Matt Chandler, he's a pastor in Texas, he said this. He says, at the foot of the cross, no one should walk with a swagger, like, I'm too good for this. And no one should walk with a limp either. Because your sin has been forgotten as far as the east is from the west. We're broken people becoming authentic followers of Jesus at this church. Meaning, we are people who have embraced our brokenness. I know sin has disqualified me and Satan tries to destroy me, but I've given my life to Jesus. So by the way, if that's you, you've not given your life to Jesus, sin's still having its way and Satan's still having their way with you, you're welcome here. But you're not welcome to stay in your brokenness because we believe there's one who wants to heal your brokenness. to redeem your brokenness so that you can become an authentic follower of Jesus. And here's what you have to understand. If you get nothing else today, this one line, I'm going to have it on the screen. When you bring your brokenness to Jesus, you are no longer a victim of destructive brokenness. You are now a victor who lives with redemptive brokenness. So people can see your scars, yes, but they have been healed, they have been redeemed. When God looks at you, he sees a child of his. The righteousness of God in Christ is what he sees when he looks at you. The New Testament letters are crazy. We read stories and things about churches that are they're living in sin, they're making bad decisions, but you want to know what every single New Testament letter opens with? To the saints in whatever city they're, not to the sinners, to the saints. Because when God looks at you, he sees your sainthood, not your sin nature. Because righteousness from Jesus, this quality that he possesses that we do not, that is just as if he had never sinned and just as if he had always been righteous and always been good, that has been given. It's been counted to us. So what does that mean? It means now we have been repositioned as victors, and now we've come full circle. Because to combat the brokenness around us, you're going to need some courage and you're going to need some boldness. But you don't get courage and you don't get boldness by mustering it up, by getting yourself into an emotional frenzy. You get courage and you get boldness by remembering that Christ has redeemed your brokenness. And so as you have confronted the brokenness within your own heart and given that to Jesus, you can boldly look at the brokenness in our culture and in our world around us and combat it. You can speak the gospel boldly to it. And you don't have to be afraid, because by the way, guys, that is where most of us find ourselves when we're not following Jesus. We're just afraid. I'm afraid of what they'll think of me. I'm afraid I might say the wrong thing. I'm afraid they're going to misjudge me, mischaracterize me. I'm afraid they're going to think I'm like that person or this person. And I just want to affirm something in you. You should be afraid of that, because they will. They will discount you. They will discredit you. They will think, wow, this person is crazy. But why does that bother us? The worst thing someone could do to me is kill me. But if he does, I will stand next to Jesus that very next moment. So what do we have to be afraid of, church? The church of the future has to be a church that is courageous, not mean-spirited, not modeling the evil of our world and putting religious language around it. We have to be courageous, boldly proclaiming the gospel. And when people think differently of us in light of that, I want to remind you what Charles Spurgeon, a pastor in the 1800s, reminded his congregation when he said this: bold-hearted men are always called mean-spirited by cowards who shrink from disagreeable truths that save souls. If the world is not disagreeing with you, you need to ask yourself, what gospel am I living among? And what gospel am I living within? Because we forget that the one who actually can heal brokenness came to this world, and what did we do to him? We crucified him. So Christian, don't shrink back. Don't be afraid. You are a victor in Christ, and you can live accordingly, guided by his Spirit, like Paul said, the knowledge of his will. But you have to first confront your own brokenness. We're going to look inside of our own hearts and go, God, what am I minimizing in my own life that breaks your heart, so that I can elevate what's happening out there that also breaks your heart? Because they both break your heart. And this right here has to be completely surrendered to you before I do something about that out there. So I want to invite you, would you hold out your hands like this, just in a posture of reception? I'm going to pray over us. Then I want you to have a moment with the Lord We say, Lord, we want you to speak to us now. Our prayer is Psalm 139. Search us, O God, and know our hearts. Reveal to us if there is any wicked way within us, Lord. We want our hearts completely given to you. The brokenness in our lives, God, completely given to you so you can restore it and you can reposition us, Lord, as victors in your kingdom. Holy Spirit, speak to your church. We are listening.